Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's guest is a disruptive innovation evangelist. He has worked in disruption of the banking industry in India, Thailand, and in the US. Sanjay was employee number 7 of X.com, which was later renamed to the company we all know as PayPal. At the day of this recording, it is Sanjay's last day as an entrepreneur because Elon Musk knocked on his door again to join SpaceX to lead Starlink as country director India. Please welcome to the show Sanjay Bhargava. Hello, Sanjay. Great to meet you. Great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm great, Jens, and thank you very much for inviting me on your show. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to learn from you and explore together with you the disruptive part of this world and the innovation piece in that. But before we go into that, of course, we want to know who you are. So one topic which is super interesting for me, and we laughed about that already before. Today is your last day as an entrepreneur. But before we go into this, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and how did you come to where you are today?
Yeah, so I sort of grew up in India and studied in India, and took my first job with Citibank in India. And I was fortunate to become what I call a disruptive innovation practitioner. Citibank at that time was looking for something quantum, like they called it Project Quantum, where it would take Citibank in India to the next level.
Hmm.
So one of the ideas that I submitted got selected, and then I was told, "Hey, you go do it." Okay. So that sort of introduced me to, and the idea in brief was to do corporate cash management for the top 300 companies in India. And that seemed ridiculous because Citibank had only 6 branches in 4 cities, and India, as you know, is vast,
Yeah.
right? So, but I said we can do it for the 4 cities and start with that, and because these are the largest cities, and then we'll expand. But it grew from that. We did a lot of partnerships and things like that, and with the partnerships, it became the biggest network in India, and we ended up moving 5% of India's GDP through this network, and we had 95% market share.
Hmm.
You know, so that got me sort of on Citibank's map, and they selected me to be on the international staff. And I moved to Thailand, where also I was fortunate to do another disruptive thing, but this was now in custodial services, because Thailand, this was just before the 1997 crash. Actually, like 1989 to 1993, I was there.
Hmm.
So well before, but Thailand was becoming the flavor of the month. I mean, like, so a lot of institutional investors, including people from Germany, were flocking to Thailand, to invest. And it was a very difficult market because, shares were not dematerialized. So you had these huge bunches of shares which you had to keep in custodial services
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And there, the interesting nugget was the pricing. So at that time, the pricing was that if you access stuff electronically, you had to pay an electronic access fee, while if you took paper, you it was free. So I thought it was ridiculous, So I changed that around. I said, if you take paper, you will have to pay a very high fee, and if you do electronic, it will be free, and we'll sort of get our electronic system such that you won't need the paper. So that involved some training and so on, so because these are very early days, of
Hmm.
what was called electronic banking, much before the internet. So anyway, so that we ended up getting 36% market share
Hmm.
from 1%. And it's very difficult to get a custodial client to switch, because switching costs are tremendous.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was another good thing. So now I moved with Citibank to the US and did a bunch of things there. But the US was slightly different because it was not that innovative. The branches were much more innovative.
Hmm.
But anyway, I was like heading strategy and quality for one part of the business, which was global funds transfers. So other banks, we used to handle their funds transfer
Yeah.
stuff. And I used to head strategy and quality for that business globally. So while I was doing that, I came up across this thought when the internet's early days, so that would be the summer of 1998, that, this email is a unique ID. And it would be really nice because otherwise, the way funds transfers are handled, so suppose you are in Thailand and you wanted to transfer some money to, say, Mexico. Now you'd go to this poor banker in Thailand and tell him, I want to transfer money to Mexico. And he doesn't even know where Mexico is. Right? Some, if you say Guadalajara in Mexico or something, then this guy's pulling out all these kind of books and trying to figure out how to make this transfer happen. Right?
Hmm.
So anyway, I came upon this and then I started socializing the idea. And I guess there were other thinkers around that also in Silicon Valley. And, soon this idea really caught fire. And I also took it to the Citibank board, but we'll talk about that later because that's another interesting story. So anyway, cut a long story short, I tried to do my own startup, but that didn't work out because my co-founder didn't want to move to the West Coast, and then he made it difficult for me to do a startup with anyone else. But
Hmm.
I had met Mike Moritz from Sequoia Capital, and Elon had uh, founded X.com,
Hmm.
and Sequoia was an investor. So Mike Moritz told him about me. I was in New York. And so I got a call from Elon, and he said, you must come and meet me. So I said, yeah, next time that I'm in the Bay Area, I'll come and meet you. And I didn't know who Elon Musk was because he was an unknown entity at that point.
Yeah.
And so he said, no, I'm sending you tickets. You get on the next flight and come. So I ended up going there. And then, uh, you know, uh, we had a very, very long interview, which actually ended up with my saying, okay, I'll join you, but here are my terms.
Yeah.
Uh, I want a fair amount of restricted stock. I want to be a VP. And Elon said, that's all fine, but you have one problem with you, that you are a big company guy. And I don't know how you work in a startup. So let's work together for 15 days. If your terms are fine, and if you do fine, then I'll agree to all your terms. And he did. And well, the
So,
rest is free.
so just to ask a question, so which time was that, around early 2000s or?
No. This was September 1999.
So
So this was a
you
company
worked
called X.com. Yeah.
so you worked September 99 with Elon Musk, where he was literally not really known at that time, like compared
No.
to today, where like
I mean,
almost
there may have
everyone
been
knows.
one or two newspaper articles because he had sold a company for $300 million in
Yeah,
cash.
yeah.
Okay, which was the largest cash deal at that point on the internet. But that was it, right? And then he had decided to invest $20 million in X.com, and then Sequoia put in 20, I think, something like that.
Hmm.
And that was about it. And there were thousands of .com companies at that time, right? It
Yeah.
was the .com boom. So there may be, then once it was started, our little office was above a bakery. So there was one article somewhere which said the bank above the bakery or something like that. Because initially maybe some people thought we were doing an online bank, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was really an online payment company. That was it. So I was, I think, the seventh person to join Elon
Yeah.
in this. And then Elon, then there was a person on the technology side and me. We would have like these discussions which went far into the night in terms of designing the stuff and thinking through the whole thing
Mm.
and setting very ambitious goals. Well, there's another story with that which I'll get into at some point.
So,
You know,
so was it PayPal already named at that time, or was it different names?
no, it was X.com, and they
Uh,
acquired. We acquired a company called Confinity, which
mm-hmm.
owned the PayPal brand, and Peter Thiel was the CEO of that.
Yeah.
And then the combined entity was called X.com PayPal,
Yeah.
and then X.com was dropped, and it became PayPal. Yeah, that was the story.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's so long time ago already.
Yeah. So after that, in 2004, I came to India and I did a bunch of things, including angel investing, some startups, working with the government, because I realized that the Indian ecosystem was not very supportive
Mm,
for innovation.
mm,
It's better now, but still has a ways to go. We can talk a little bit more about what a supportive ecosystem should be for
yeah,
countries.
yeah,
Because a lot of people have toyed with this idea of why is Silicon Valley so different? Like, why does it do all the stuff that it does? Why can't I do a Silicon Valley? And a lot of
yeah,
people call themselves, this is Bangalore Silicon Valley, or this is whatever Silicon Valley. But none of them end up, you know, to this date. I'm sure they will at some point,
mm,
uh, but you still haven't been able to replicate Silicon Valley.
yeah. So, so then you came back to India, and you're still in India. You just moved,
Yeah.
like, what was, like, a couple of weeks ago or months ago?
No. So, yeah. So from I moved to India in 2004, actually, very
Mm,
long time ago. So I've been in India for 17 years now, and most of it was in Delhi. But
mm,
about a few months ago, I moved to Mumbai. One reason being the pollution in Delhi, which my mother-in-law had some problems, which was not very good for her to carry on
mm,
in a very polluted city, especially in winter. So that was part of it, but also my whole professional network, so to speak, is all in Bombay.
yeah,
And I was trying to be in Delhi to try and work with the government and things like that. But I had done that for a fair amount of time, and the thing was that I felt that it was time for a change.
mm,
And I also wanted to get into kind of coaching with a very sort of low cost coaching model
mm,
where I would work with companies who wanted to be innovative, and if they created what I call like these skunk works, so I could talk to them about disruptive innovation,
yeah,
where
yeah,
any number of people could attend, but then also coach if they wanted,
yeah,
because I wanted to spread this message of innovation, very much like I think you want to do, Jens,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
very much like that,
That's how
because
we found each other.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was what I was doing, and I really felt that my days of being a practitioner were over.
Mm,
Because time moves on, and as you age, you're not that familiar with the technologies. You haven't grown up with them,
yeah,
right? So I still believe that if I was to be a disruptive innovation practitioner at the real grassroots level, then I would be not very good. Okay,
yeah,
now, okay, I was very good, but now not anymore. So that was the logic where I said, hey, like let me enjoy life and
mm,
be happily retired. And I kind of, I don't know if you've seen this movie, Lord of the Rings, and whether you're a fan
yeah.
of
I
Tolkien.
am.
Yeah. So in some ways, I'm like Bilbo Baggins, in the Shire. Okay. And then Elon is like Gandalf and comes across and says, hey, you got to do this, you know. So anyway, so yeah. but I think this whole Starlink opportunity, which I've agreed to head in India, is amazing because it can bring broadband, like, 100% broadband coverage is possible. And that can really, change a lot of things. Like, for instance, if all the primary health clinics in a rural area are connected, then telemedicine can actually become a reality.
Yeah.
Right? And bandwidth and buffering and all will no longer be a constraint.
Yeah.
So I can see that potential, and if I could do something to help that happen, it fits in right in with my goals of trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah. Can you
So
elaborate a little bit on the story, how that happened? That you're getting to start tomorrow at Starlink, which is a company in
oh,
SpaceX. Like just a
yeah,
little bit of that story, because officially you wanted to retire.
yes, yes. No, so person from SpaceX contacted me and said that Elon had told them good things about me, and they wanted to get access to India, and would I have any thoughts and could I
Mm,
connect them with some people? So I did. Now this was probably 2.5 months ago, and I don't know what transpired after that, but I was actively trying very much to help them,
yeah.
and give them whatever insights and saying whatever is useful, use it or discard the rest, right? In there. And I guess they talked to some of them, they thought about it, whatever. But then suddenly, about 10 days ago, or maybe 15 days ago, I got a mail saying, Elon and I have talked about this, and if you are interested in heading India for us, then we would be delighted, right? So I was a bit taken aback, to be frank, because I said, yeah, wow, I'd be super delighted to do this, but I just need to know, why am I the best person for SpaceX?
Yeah.
Then they gave me some logic that they needed a person that they could trust. They needed a person who could speak their language, who was an out of the box thinker and stuff like that. And I checked all those boxes. So then we had a few things, of because my main concerns were that I'm age, to some extent, hunger. I mean, I'm not hungry anymore. Well. But I didn't see those as showstoppers because, touch wood, I'm in good health and
Yeah.
full of energy. So age is just a number. And the hunger does not have to come from wealth. It can come from passion.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm truly passionate about. So the few things I was concerned about was the domain and a little bit about India because India is difficult,
Mm,
and and I didn't want to be breaking my head on India, like in there. But again, we've realized that if I hire the right people, the right firms, and manage the process well, um, and the lack of domain was not such a big thing because I'm an engineer, right?
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love learning new things. So this would be a fantastic thing to. Now I know very little, but my uh, knowledge is increasing. I'm now dangerous because I have a little knowledge.
Yeah.
I think I will be smooth and be up the curve fairly soon.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
that's how it transpired.
Yeah. How was it? Just the last one on that story. How was it to doing a job interview with Elon Musk? And you have worked with him in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
past. So was it like a normal way of
No,
job interview?
no, 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 because there was nothing about, what have you done since you left, whatever. No, because I think they'd researched that, whatever, and that was not the important part, right? So Elon was just telling me because he knew that to get me out of retirement and to say yes to this opportunity was not that easy, right? So
Yeah.
he was trying to convince me. But, I was more or less convinced. So it was not also that part, but it was more. um like him telling me what his vision was and my asking him questions and then he was trying to see, did I get his vision?
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And was I excited by it? And I was trying to see what is his vision, like the thing. So, but it was amazing because, it's like, say two people who play a professional sport and are good at it.
Hmm.
Uh, if you meet, then even after a number of years, you can connect very easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the conversation was very free flowing. It was scheduled for half an hour, but it went for an hour. Right? Uh,
Which I can imagine from your schedule, that might be easy to add
yeah,
another half an hour. For his schedule, is slightly different.
yeah. No, and I was surprised because I was supposed to speak with this person who had contacted me from
Yeah.
SpaceX,
Huh.
and but then suddenly I got a call, message saying, "Oh no, Elon wants to join," and so. So I was a bit surprised. I said, "Why is Elon wanting to join?" But then it was nice. So I loved it, and of course, Elon dominated the conversation.
Yeah, I
But
can imagine.
does, but it was really nice, and it's a very, very, uh, very nice mission that he has with Starlink,
Yeah.
uh, because it's really to serve the people who are underserved, and it's not a competitor. So there's a lot of misinformation about Starlink. I really didn't know much about Starlink, so
Yeah.
I didn't even know about the misinformation for that matter. But the thing is that people think it's going to compete with terrestrial broadband, with 4G, 5G, etc. But it's actually not. It's a totally different physics, and it's complementary, not
Hmm.
competitive, right? So if you can reach a place with 4G, 5G, or fiber, then by all means you should do it. But you can't reach every place on Earth
Yeah.
with that. And so places which are easy to reach, satellite broadband is expensive, one, and secondly, uh, the signals interfere. So if the density is too high, it's perfect for fiber, 4G, and maybe the coming 5G.
Yeah.
But where density is low, that's not good for satellite. Where the density is good, that's good for satellite,
Hmm.
and not good for these other people. So it really makes the job of providing 100% broadband coverage for everybody on Earth very much easier. And it will not be through satellite. Only 3 to 5% of them will be covered through satellite,
Yeah.
right? The rest will be covered by all these things. But then you can imagine the applications, because the applications don't have to be designed assuming that the network will fail and something
Yeah.
else
Exactly.
will,
And
so
that's then enabling people to be connected who can't be, like, literally don't have a signal, don't have a cable, don't have 5G, whatever right now.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
then a huge impact for their lives and as well for society and business.
Yes, absolutely.
Huh. So I would love to dig into the disruption and disruptive innovation. And you said, let's start with individuals. So what is disruptive innovation for you, and specifically then looking into the individual perspective?
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to say is that not everybody can be a disruptive innovator, right? So
Mm.
I'll take the example of a cricketer, because that's very a popular sport in India, or basketball. So not everybody can be a Sachin Tendulkar or a Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have some kind of an innate talent, right? So whether you have an innate talent for music, or you have an innate talent for a particular sport,
Mm.
so there is some innate talent that you need for being a disruptive innovator. But if you have that, then you have to work really hard at that talent to burnish it, to get it to other things. So there's very few people who will be like, I guess, Mozart or Beethoven, who started playing the piano at some ridiculously early age, and they were like supremely talented. Or a person like Elon, maybe it comes very naturally to him.
Mm.
But for most people, you have to work at it. and it's something that can be learned. It's not, but you have to work at it systematically. And now there are lots of resources. Like I have a YouTube channel which is free,
Mm.
but there are many other resources, which are there, and you can study. The books by Clayton Christensen are fabulous.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so if you study it, then the question becomes, why study it, right? Why should you be a disruptive innovator, right? You can do so many other things, but like if you're good at it, then you can make a lot of money, but that's a side effect
Yeah.
of making the world better, according to me. Okay. So you can have a great time, enjoy, as well as make the world better. And if material wealth is your goal, then you can do that as well, right? So there's some very strong reasons to see whether you can be a disruptive innovator and then to work on it. And even if you are not yourself a disruptive innovator, and you're a very senior manager, let's say, you need to know how to nurture disruptive innovation or disruptive innovators in your organization.
Yeah. That's super important point,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
So,
I've seen it in the past as well, where it's like there are people and they're in corporations, they're sometimes seen as the troublemakers.
yes, yes, very true.
Because they question things from different angles and things like, hey, let's try this. That sounds crazy, but I think there is something.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's super important to nurture that, and being able to give them space in an organization.
Yeah. So let me move on now to companies, unless you had some more questions on
No, that's
individuals.
good. It's good.
Okay. So now moving on to companies. So, I'm going to actually tell you a story, because I think you can communicate things more clearly with stories.
Hmm.
So I told you earlier that, I'd taken the idea that became PayPal and to Citibank in the summer of 1998.
Hmm.
And while I was not senior enough to present it to the board directly, but my boss's boss did. Okay.
Hmm.
And the board considered the idea and they liked it. Because it was a good idea, right? I mean, people could see it, right? But then there was this question of saying, hey, should we be the innovators? Um, because this will cannibalize our existing funds transfer business.
Hmm.
Okay. And also, where will we put this, right? Because this is not in a consumer banking thing, a corporate banking thing. We don't know where to put this. Who will run it in there? So that's a very classical problem in big companies. Maybe
Yeah.
not in IKEA where you're from, but
It's everywhere.
yeah. So then the board said, no, let's just wait. If it happens, somebody will do it, and we'll buy them or do something, right?
Hmm.
In there. So I was, and at that time, Citigroup was merging with Travelers, right? So then I spoke with my boss and I said, there are lots of people who are going to lose their jobs because of this merger. So why do you want some poor person to lose this job, right? I'm ready to go. Just give me the package. The package was quite generous, right? So I said, let's take this and go and explore the world,
Yeah.
And then I'd given myself 3 years to try and do something outside Citibank, because Citibank is very comfortable, like you have the golden handcuffs and everything, so anyway, so that happened, right? I left Citibank, and then ended up in PayPal, and then PayPal started making waves. So these analyst meetings. So one of the analysts, I think she was a lady called Mary Meeker or something, was a very big internet analyst.
Hmm.
She basically asked Citibank, saying, "What are you doing? You're letting companies like PayPal eat your lunch, right?" So then Citibank felt compelled to mount a competitive response,
Yeah.
right? But this is the interesting part, and it's this whole DNA thing, that what they ended up doing was creating a unit called C2IT within Citibank. Uh, and they just didn't have the DNA. They didn't understand the internet. So they made funds transfers. They said, we can't make them free. Let's charge $1.
Hmm.
Right? because free was like, okay, it's too, so, and then, they had 18 million touch points. At that point, uh, PayPal had 1 million touch points. So in PayPal, we were quite worried, because if Citibank comes in with 18 million touch points and we have 1 million,
Yeah.
then this is a network thing, it would be hard. But they made like a 3-page form that you had to fill in on the internet to open an account. While in PayPal, you could do it with 2 or 3 clicks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they didn't say, like, I had a bank account with Citibank for 18 years because I used to work there, right?
Mm.
But I couldn't get a C2 account. I had to fill in this 3-page form on the internet and stuff. So then we said, okay, we are more worried about garage startups than Citibank, in there. So that turned out to be a disaster, and they had to shut it down. Okay.
Yeah.
Then they had a third crack at the cherry, uh, which was where they could have acquired PayPal, when eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion.
Mm.
And I think this was in 2002, if I'm not wrong, right? So maybe 20 years ago. And now PayPal is a 320, $330 billion company.
Yeah.
So it's grown like 200 times plus from that acquisition.
Yeah.
But they thought it was too expensive, right? So they passed on it, right? Now, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming anyone here, because everyone does things, and I have a great regard for Citibank and all that. But it's like, my motto is blame no one, but try to
Yeah.
inspire everyone. So the only reason I'm telling this story is to inspire the managements of today, right? Because they have the benefit of the story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Saying that, please nurture your disruptors, try and figure out how you're going to make disruptive innovation work. And the interesting thing is that I told you earlier about my successes in the same organization,
Yeah.
Citibank,
Yeah.
okay, in India and in Thailand. So, so in the US, very different from the branches, right? So it's quite important to think about how you can actually uh, create an enabling ecosystem, and also have maybe startups, okay, compete with your existing products,
Yeah.
keep them totally separate, because if you don't do that, then you will get cannibalized.
Yeah.
You have to cannibalize your own stuff, then you will win. So I think a lot of companies, they forget about this. And I can speak for banks, because that's where I'm from. I don't think anything has changed in banks over the years, because R&D, which could be called the innovation function,
Yeah. Yeah.
is not a recognized function,
Yeah.
in most places. And even if it's for show.
Yeah,
So
let's try to improve it a little bit, like 2% of what we have. It's not the goal is not to disrupt.
yeah, but like in Citibank
Yeah.
in India way back, uh, they made a very conscious effort of putting some of their best people into these quantum projects.
Mm.
And then they made sure that whatever emergency there was in the business as usual, they would not take these people out,
Yeah.
because they were the future,
Yeah.
right? So this difference between the future and the present is another very important thing to this thing. And you have to have the right people in
Mm.
this kind of thing, you know. So that's the really important part to figure out.
Yeah.
So that is what I wanted to actually try to communicate to companies in these sessions, which I would probably do for 2 hours, and talk about 1 hour about all this kind of stuff. And here I should also mention one very interesting book, the last book that Clayton Christensen wrote. Unfortunately, he passed away.
Yeah.
We lost a great mind very early. Um, but I think there is a Clayton Christensen Institute and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
and co-authors are there. And I've actually managed to connect with them also quite recently.
Yeah.
So you know, the so this book asks a very interesting question, and this will be a good segue into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is disruptive innovation for countries.
Yeah.
So it asks, like, when so many trillions of dollars have been given in aid, so many trillions of dollars have been given by philanthropists, by foundations, and so on and so forth. Why are the outcomes not that good? And we are not talking about just wealth. Okay, we are talking about climate change. We are talking about a variety of things, like health outcomes, um, environmental outcomes, wealth outcomes. So, and in fact, this book shows that in about 20 countries, the indicators are worse than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
In some countries are better, but not as much as you would think, right? So it examines why the traditional way of thinking does not uh, is not very optimal for making the world prosperous.
Yeah.
So very thought provoking, and it offers solutions also. So it talks about some market creating innovations and stuff like that. But I won't steal the book's thunder by trying to paraphrase it. But I would highly recommend that we read it. I'm going to be reading it for the second time, and then I'm in the complex that I'm staying. There are a few people who are interested, so we might do a book discussion on the book and stuff like that. And I'm almost going to make it mandatory for anyone who wants to join my team in India that they
Yeah.
must
So,
read this
so
book.
whenever they listen this, they know where it comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there was another very interesting course, which was a Harvard course on edX called Entrepreneurship in Emerging Economies by a professor, Tarun Khanna. It's
Hmm.
an old course, but very interesting. These are the two mandatory things that I'm going to like. You also got to do that on the verified track,
Yeah.
because there's an audit track which is free. But I'm saying, look, if you can't spend like 15,000 rupees or whatever it is to, you know, sort of gain some knowledge, then maybe you're not the right person for my
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I like that way of thinking where it's you need to invest into your ways of thinking.
Yes.
It's not the history of what you have done. It's not your experience. It's really the thinking is the important part because that helps you to like you said, is connecting the future to today and looking into how can we use these opportunities while thinking differently in different ways, and then
Yeah.
really bridging that. Yeah, I would like to dig deeper into the disruption from a country perspective.
Sure. Sure.
What
So I
what,
think
what
that in some ways is the most important. Please
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, I was about to ask you, what are the things you see and what are the things you have discovered? And we have had an email exchange where you as well have taken an outlook into that and how are like possibilities we could do. Would you like to talk about these topics, going deeper into that?
Yeah, sure. So, in countries, it's kind of interesting, because so I'll speak with the perspective of India, but it
Yeah,
could apply to many other countries.
yeah,
So India has had kind of socialist roots. So it's never been communist, but it's never been capitalist. But the basic underpinning has been socialism.
mm,
And so free enterprise was bad, but it's always been liberalizing and reforming and moving more and more towards a free enterprise system. But that, what I would call the baggage of socialism, is still very strong. And I am not a very ardent uh, believer in unregulated free enterprise. In fact, I think it's terrible. Okay, so we need to have free enterprise, but it needs to be regulated.
yeah,
Um, you know, but it needs to be regulated in a very interesting way. So I'm again going to tell you a very quick story on PayPal. So when we launched PayPal, or rather X.com, That was December 7th, 1999. So around the 15th, and we did it because we wanted to do it before Christmas, and there was this $10 giveaway, and which kind of helped X.com explode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so around the 15th, Elon got a call from a gentleman called Roger Ferguson. And this conversation was supposed to be off the record, but now it's so many years, I guess people will forgive me for putting it on the record, and I have it other places as well. So Elon said, "You must come with me for this meeting because you're the only person who understands banking."
Yeah.
So I went for this meeting, and the person said that, "Look, I only have 10 minutes, but tell me, and so don't tell me what X.com is because I have opened an account and I've moved money." So, first of all, we almost fell off our chairs because we're saying the vice chairman of the Fed, someone reporting to Alan Greenspan, okay, has used X.com, which is an unknown entity, like one among thousands of startups. So, how does he even know that we exist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was interesting because he said that, in the Fed, we have people who are looking out for innovative companies, young staffers. And one
Yeah.
of them pointed out this company to me. So I just went home and I, opened an account and I moved stuff. So I know what it is. So let's not waste time on it. But tell me, why did you start this company? And Elon said, payments in the world are terrible and we want to disrupt this and blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so he said, look, we've been trying to tell the banks and the credit card companies for the last 20 years to do this. So we are delighted that you're doing it. And while this conversation is totally off the record, remember you have a friend in Washington. And, so we were like, oh, over the moon, but this is how regulators support startups,
Mm.
if
Mm.
they're doing something which they consider good. Now, it wasn't as if our friend in Washington did some special favors for X.com or PayPal, but they ensured that companies like X.com and PayPal did not have to get licensed. So it's a little bit like Bitcoin. No one knows what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
slowly the regulations are coming. So in countries where they permit innovation, they allow people to do stuff till they become a systemic threat,
Mm.
right? So a company like Napster was shut down because it was out of control, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But a company like PayPal, when the banks and other people complain to the regulators saying we have to do all this compliance and all, and these people are just getting a free ride. So the regulators told them that, look, don't tell us our job. Okay.
Yeah.
We know what this company is doing. It's doing good. Just go and compete with them. Don't come and complain to us. But that's not the kind of thing in most other countries, because always when there's disruption, there are going to be vested interests,
Yeah.
right? We want to preserve the status quo. So I feel it is the job of the regulators in a country to actually promote innovation because they want it, and then also regulate it, right? So you can trust people, but you need to verify.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can't have now the same regulators, right? So in the US, and I don't know if you've seen this documentary on Netflix called Inside Job, which
No,
is
I
not
haven't.
very commentary to Greenspan and all, but it's about the debt crisis, that housing crisis, the bubble,
Mm.
right? So you can go very extreme on one side, just saying, oh, wait, now you don't need to do any checks and you can get a mortgage with no down payment and blah, blah, blah. Then you have all these funny structures come up and you say it's all innovation, and all that. No, so it's not. So, I think the pendulum swung too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to get a balance. You have to support good innovation and you have to put the brakes on bad innovation, right? So it's a tough job. The regulator's job is a tough job, and you have to get that balance right? So what I feel in a country like India is that there are many problems, right? Like, so there's this air pollution problem, there's a poverty problem, there is like you name it, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Slums are there, whatever. And there's also a huge amount of development. India is one of the fastest growing economies. Of course, COVID gave it a setback, but it's still among the fastest growing economies in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like Jekyll and Hyde in some ways, in there. So now, to me, there is no way. Like, so if you take schools in India, the government schools are nowhere as good as private schools. Okay. Now, they have been trying to fix this for years.
Mm.
But if you got really large companies to come in and say, hey, we need your help to fix the schooling system and we're going to privatize it, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
here's the thing, okay, or, that we want you to do. And we want you to invest a fair amount of capital. So there's a very high minimum capital requirement. And you can do innovative stuff and you can tell us a plan. And if your plan looks good, we'll approve it. And it'll be really quick. We'll approve it, and then you have to say what outcomes you will deliver.
Mm.
And if you don't deliver those outcomes, there'll be heavy penalties, right? So in that way, they can roll out the red carpet for innovative firms and really attract them, because India has some fantastic advantages. It has huge density. So the whole problem, or huge of everything, like you name it, it's very big.
Yeah.
Right? So, so the thing is that what is the most challenging problem for a disruptive innovator or a disruptive innovation company? It is not raising capital. It's not building a team. The biggest challenge is getting critical mass,
Yeah.
right? And uh, now the second thing is data, right? Huge amounts of data, right? So the nice thing is, so in some ways in India, they announced something called the new umbrella entities, which will compete with the National Payment Company of India, which was quite nice. But then for some reason, maybe, I don't know, maybe good reasons, whatever, they canceled it, right? So that doesn't send the right signals in there, right? But in other places, there is talk of sharing a lot of agricultural data,
Mm.
uh, and then having companies like Google, Microsoft, etc., come in and do data mining and artificial intelligence and so on and so forth to improve agricultural productivity and stuff like that. So where can a company like Google or Microsoft get this rich trove of data,
Yeah.
which would be fantastic. So how can countries think of what are the things which will attract world-class companies, or startups, or whatever? Because even startups these days, you can raise huge amounts of capital. Capital is not the issue, if you're good. And how can you solve those problems really fast? Now, some people say, you know, why fast, right? Because fast can create a lot of problems. But see, to me, this is a little bit of ivory tower thinking,
Mm.
because people like you and me, we sit in nice air-conditioned rooms and whatever, right? Uh, and we're not like we are ivory tower thinkers, But if you are a person who's on the ground, struggling with poverty, struggling with infant mortality, struggling with maternal mortality, for you, every month which is lost is a struggle, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I think that we have a moral imperative in certain ways, not to keep debating these things, you know. So one of the things which I think people have won Nobel prizes for is this randomized controlled trials, which are the gold standard of
Mm.
trying to prove something. Now they're fine, but they take a lot of time, right? Now with disruptive innovation, it's a different thing. You go in and you try something and it fails, and then you learn, and then you fail again. Like so, I've been watching SpaceX on the side. I mean, how many starships have blown up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right? And they cost a lot of money, but that's the way you're going to learn. You're not going to learn by putting something in academic textbooks and then having like really good debates on it and peer review and all this kind of stuff. So there's a place for all that, but I'm saying that where lives are involved, where human lives are involved, where delay is critical, I don't think we should err. So there may be problems, with disruptive innovation. There can be lives lost also in certain cases.
Yeah.
And I think I watched one of your podcasts where there was this gentleman who was talking about, I forget his name, but uh, he was talking about how there's a totally wrong question being asked about autonomous driving, right?
Yeah.
Where people say, how many people will autonomous driving kill, right? While the correct question is, how many will it save, right, from getting killed, right? There, right? So it just depends on the lens that you look at things with in that.
Yeah, it
So,
was it was the discussion or episode with Mario Herga, who is
yeah,
living in Silicon Valley, but is an Austrian. So, like,
yes, and he
he's
writes
coming
books in German. Yeah,
he's coming from the same background like I come, and it's like, yeah, we are thinking differently here in Central Europe right now, where
right.
it's really about, like, how can we be extra protective and super safe in whatever we do, and we think everything 20 times through before we do it. But like you say, it's not going to happen when it comes to innovation and disruptive innovation. You need to try. You need to as well be fine with failing on the way, because that's the only way you learn.
Yeah. So one of the big takeaways that I want people, whoever listens to this podcast, to take away is that if you are part of what I call the new monarchy in India, which is the bureaucrats, the regulators, the judiciary, and the politicians, to see that you need to kind of trust the private sector, but you need to verify,
Hmm.
right? So first, they're not all bad players in the private sector. There are some very good players, right? Just as there are some excellent bureaucrats, some excellent regulators, some excellent judges, some excellent politicians. And in general, I like to believe that the world is good. It's not that, everybody is, because after you made a certain amount of money, I know there are these anecdotal cases of people who just make, money after money and nothing is enough for them. But there are enough people, I think, on the other side also, people like maybe you and me and others, and so on and so forth, who say we've made enough, right?
Yeah.
And one day we are going to die, right? And we're not going to go with nothing, right? So, there are enough people on the good side, so it's the job for the people running countries, in my opinion, okay, to find and attract the good
Yeah.
people, and then give them rope and put them feet to the fire, okay. And so that is the big takeaway that I would like to. And I would also like to talk briefly about the China common prosperity experiment, because I find this very interesting. I don't know much about it, but it's very close to this universal prosperity thing.
Yeah.
But I would like to also approach it with a little bit of a different lens, this common prosperity thing. And I think there's a need for a new social contract. And I'm the first to admit that, look, my thoughts may be haywire here. But I don't mind, because that's the whole practice of disruptive innovation. You put thoughts out there and be ready to change.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
people say you're crazy and then you agree that, yeah, this is crazy. Okay, in there. So, in my sort of construct at this point in time, I think making obscene amounts of money should absolutely be allowed, right? Because if people do this legally, why not, right?
Yeah.
So why begrudge an Elon Musk or a Bezos or a Zuckerberg or whoever, if they've made the money the right way, then, it's fine. But I feel that this thing of that in some ways there should be some amount of um, levy which goes to a universal prosperity foundation, not the government.
Hmm.
And this foundation can take care of welfare and also the minimum wage kind of jobs. Because I think there was a person, Rudolf Berger or something, who wrote about utopia or something like that, something. Uh, you know, so it's this universal basic income, but with a little bit of twist, right? So if you work for 15 hours in a mind-numbing job, which is like a minimum wage job,
Yeah.
then you should be paid for 40. You know, and if country, I mean, things work 24/7, then jobs are not going to be a problem, right? But in this design, welfare abuse and et cetera, has to be thought of, and there are several issues. So it's a very, very complicated puzzle, right? And there has to be a room for welfare because, if there are various monks and certain religious orders who just want to spend their life seeking God, then they should be allowed to do that. But then you have vows of chastity and whatever else, right? So you can't just sit down and watch Netflix and football games and say, okay, the state, you please pay for
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
stuff, right? So it's a very to me a very interesting and complex puzzle. And the last thing that I would want to end on, and then it's up to you to see if you have anything else for me, is this whole notion of ending poverty and not alleviating poverty, right? Because many people feel, and things like microfinance and all, they don't end poverty, right? Because if you are going to borrow money at a high interest rate, like even though I was initially in my early days reasonably affluent, I could not afford a mortgage at, say, 4 to 6% real rates,
Yeah.
right? Because mortgages in the US are almost at zero. If you take the tax benefit and the rate and all that, maybe 1 or 2%. But 6%, then I can't afford anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for some strange reason, people feel that poor people can do this, right? Rich people can't, but poor people can, which to me is insane, right? So microfinance is clearly not the solution. It's very good for alleviating poverty because percentages are misleading when you're talking about small sums of money, right? Uh, because the absolute amount is not high. But for things of actually pulling people out of poverty, and it depends on what you define as poverty, like say a person having a affordable home, having some form of transportation or whatever.
Yeah.
So, so if you define it like that, then microfinance is not the answer. So with today's technology and platforms, we can end poverty. Everything is there to do this, except some innovative thinking, good regulation, and some of these other societal factors. Because there are many people who will not admit it, but they really don't want poverty to end.
Yeah.
So one, of course, is the conspiracy type of thing, that the poverty industry, there's a whole industry around poverty. There's no poverty, that industry will end. But I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the middle class, people like you and me, especially in India. So if the people who serve us, the chauffeurs, our domestic help, and so on and so forth, they become more affluent, right? Then they're going to demand more wages.
Yeah.
And our life is going to become more difficult, right? So, I mean, it took a civil war to end slavery in the US. So I think there are very, very complicated issues around poverty, around universal prosperity, and so on and so forth. And I don't, like I said, want to blame anyone, because blaming never gets us anything. It just raises people's hackles, and then there's no conversation. There's just shouting,
Yeah. Yeah.
in there. But I want to say, we have everything we need. There is nothing to be invented. So with person to person lending, person to person insurance, and various things, uh, we can end poverty, and we can make these. So, and that fits into the other stuff in the social contract saying, cheap credit is one of the enablers to ending poverty. So the amount of cheap credit you can get, like if in the welfare class, will be zero, right? If you are in the minimum wage class, you'll get some. But if you're in the third class, where you're either contributing to this fund or whatever, then you'll get a lot. and to help you come into the fourth class, which is the contributing class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So this whole business of how you make the path to upward mobility very simple is fascinating to me. And this actually ties in with why I accepted this job, because broadband is one of the things which is going to help upward mobility,
Yeah.
right? So the more you can, because I'm in some ways also a fan of Star Wars, the movies series, uh, where you have the good side and you have the bad side. So you have the Darth Vader and you have the Luke Skywalker and whatever, right? So now, if the path towards good is very bad, very tough, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you're bright. Why will you not go to the dark side? Become a terrorist, become a criminal, you know, because your life is not worth living, right? And you're bright, right? Then you say, okay, I'm going to take some extreme risks, or I'm going to hit back at the society which doesn't provide me opportunity.
Hmm.
So I think it's very interesting, and so ultimately, after this gig, I will want to devote more time, assuming that I continue to be healthy and all that, and spend more time thinking about this. And but maybe other people will think about it and solve it, so that I don't need to spend time trying to solve it. That would be so awesome, right? If that happens.
And
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. We started the conversation a couple of weeks back where it was around these topics and
Yeah.
discussing on how do we solve this as individual societies, companies, and so on. And it's really figuring that out will take a while, but I think we need to start. That's
Yeah.
that's that's the key point. If we don't start in finding out how to, like you said, we have all the puzzle pieces. We just need to put them together in different ways to find out what is the right combination of puzzle pieces to solve it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that if you solve the puzzle, the pot of gold is humongous, as PayPal has shown, or like
Mm.
even this book that C.K. Prahlad had written, "The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid." So this is not an altruistic thing, right?
Yeah.
People who solve this, like this is the new treasure island type of thing. Right? Like, you are seeking gold here. You're not just doing this for altruistic reasons,
Yeah.
but you need, like, say, even Christopher Columbus was supported by the monarchy to set sail, right, to discover new worlds. So you need that, So it's this whole thing. You need the Christopher Columbuses, you need the whatever, the Queen Isabella or something at that time. And, so you need all that, like to make some, really good leaps for this world. And I'm very optimistic. I think, there's so many people who are so pessimistic, they say, oh, millennials will have a terrible life, somebody else. I am not in that camp at all. And I may be very wrong, but I'm not a doomsdayer at all.
Yeah.
So like Hans Rosling, whom I'm another fan of, he says that I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm a possibilist. It is possible that this world will become really nice.
Mm.
Okay. It is definitely possible. So it's not optimistic, it's not pessimistic, it's possible.
I love that. And that's maybe a good part to end the conversation in the recording at least. Um,
Yes.
so how can people reach out to you? How can people find you?
Well, I'm like all, so actually, because I was not a very private person, so I'm there on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on Twitter somehow, I
Yeah.
find. So LinkedIn is one place where, I have quite a few followers and, stuff. So I tend to use that platform to post some of my thoughts and things. I have a YouTube channel, but
Mm.
I don't think I'm going to get a lot of time. But there are lots of videos there already,
Yeah.
maybe some 100 videos. So if any of them are useful for people, great. They can look at it. And one of the things when people look at it, is that thoughts change. I don't want people to tell me, 3 years ago you said this, and now you're saying that. Yeah, so what, right? I may have said that, but my thinking changed. Okay, but so that's the thing, and yeah, so people can reach out to me. I've written so many documents. Okay, that my emails are mentioned there, my personal emails and my phone number,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So of course, I'll have a work thing which will be totally separate, and I don't want people to reach out to me on that because unless there's a work related thing, but they're
Yeah.
happy. I'll be happy to reach, because. I sort of manage my time very efficiently. So while I may have less time, this is a passion. So for your passion, you make time.
Yeah, that's important. Now we'll put a couple of links to your YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and so on as well into the show notes so people can find you easily. Sanjay, thank you very much for your time. I wish you a lot of luck and fun as well in your new job that's starting tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to see Starlink changing really the broadband in India, or not the broadband, but the connection, let's say, in India, and see the I at least foresee it's like great job you will be doing. I'm following you closely and hope to stay in contact.
Thanks a lot, Jens. So I need a lot of luck.
Yeah, that's how it is, and really looking forward to see what disruptions are coming. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much again once again for having me on your show.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any questions to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on social media and contact me there. Thanks, and see you in the next episode.